Hello and welcome back to another knitting podcast. My name's Elisa and I make a knitting podcast and videos for you guys every week. I follow a very similar style to other knitting podcasts here on YouTube, and I love to just share with you guys whatever I'm working on, whether it's a project or a sewing project or some sort of crochet project. I love to share all sorts of things yardy related, fun, and fiber arts. I am very into that right now. So this podcast, I have quite a bit to share with you, but not nearly as much as I would have thought with it being 2 weeks since my last podcast video. But I am excited to share, so I will go ahead and do that. I also recently came back from my trip from Arizona with my husband, where we had a really nice, fun, relaxing time. And I think I'll just insert a little bit more towards the end of the podcast of things that we did and maybe some video that I got, just for fun if you are interested. I don't know if I'll continue to do stuff like that in the future, but I do think it'd be fun to look back on for me personally and see a lot of really great memories that we made over that small trip. I am excited to share something that I got on that trip though, and if you watched my previous podcast, you already might have an idea of what I got. But I will save that for the acquisitions section of the podcast. So with that being said, go ahead and get yourself something cozy to drink or some cold tea since it's finally getting warm outside. But I will just go ahead and jump right in. I don't have any finished objects for this week that I can think of. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I do have quite a bit of progress made on a few things. So the first thing I will grab is this sock that I'm working on. I think in the last podcast I had just cast off and blocked this sock right here, which is a pattern by Drops, and I don't remember what it's called. I will insert it right here on the video, what this pattern is called, but it is a lace pattern, and I was inspired by Spring Ferns, I think is what the original pattern was called. And I was inspired by that, but I wanted to find a free one that was somewhat similar, and you can kind of see here that it's a very simple lace pattern that's going on here, which I thought would be great for never have done any sort of lace before, so I wanted something that was a little bit more simple and easy to follow and very beginner friendly for getting into lace. And this is the pattern that I found. Now typically the pattern, Drops patterns, if you've ever seen them, they can be a little bit difficult to follow, and you definitely have to know what you're doing for some of them. Where like I've tried to read a few of the patterns and tried to make them, and I could not get past the first steps, and I was like, okay, not for me. I'm not experienced enough to figure out what they are wanting me to do in this. This pattern, however, was very like straightforward. I didn't have really any issues with it. I did change a few things for myself, and one of those things was the heel flap here. So in the pattern it just tells you to just knit stockinette back and forth for a while, but I personally like having a little bit more structure on my heel, and I did that with this finished one here. You can see that the heel has a little bit more structure with that slip stitch heel flap here, and that just helps with wear when you knit socks, because your heel is one of the parts of the sock that actually gets the most wear and tear, and this just adds a little bit more fabric, I guess, to help make it a little bit more durable and withstand wear over time. So that's why I chose to do this. Now, with the first sock that I made, I actually messed up the stitch count. I had the stitch count correct, I just messed up in the pattern where I was supposed to start and stop the lace, so I was off by a stitch. And that ended up making the heel flap here a perfect even amount of stitches, which made my slip stitch heel very easy to do. Whereas this, I had the correct stitch count, so I followed the pattern, but that makes the heel flap an odd number of stitches, so it's a little bit weird on one side where I make a salvage edge, which is easy to pick up stitches. So you can see that the salvage edges look a little bit different on each side. And maybe you can't see it as much as I can. Well, it's really not that bad actually. Maybe I'm just picky. But it was making it a little bit more different. I really don't see a big difference anymore. I think I was just being picky and overdramatic. But, so it's not a perfect heel or slip stitch construction where you pretty much slip the first stitch so that way it creates a salvage edge, which makes it very easy to pick up stitches for the gusset, but you slip the first stitch and then knit the second, and you continue in that pattern so you end on a knit stitch. And then when you turn back over, you can slip that first stitch. Whereas I am knitting both of the last two stitches, so that way I can keep my salvage edge. It really doesn't make a huge deal, but it's just something that I noticed. And I should talk about the yarn, even though if you've seen my podcast, you probably know about this yarn. So I am knitting this with Hobby's Rainbow Sock Wool. It's a 4-ply sock wool, and it is 75% wool and 25% polyamide. I don't mind knitting with this at all. It feels a little bit more, I don't want to say rustic. It doesn't really feel rustic. I don't think I've ever felt a rustic wool, but it doesn't feel like superwash. It feels like wool. I have only really knit my other socks with superwash wool, so, well, I did knit my Craggy Shore sock in the same sock base as this, but I noticed it was a little bit scratchy when I did put it on, which here we are like 3 or 4 months later and I still haven't knit the second sock. But I promise you guys, I don't have second sock syndrome. I just think I'm too excited about other projects, which really is second sock syndrome. But I've made all the second socks for all my other pairs, so do with that what you will, I guess. And this sock weight, I really don't mind it. I enjoy working with it, but it'll be interesting to see if it still feels as scratchy. I haven't really tried this one on apart from like the one time I did, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to how it would feel. When you feel it here just on its own, it feels softer than the other one that I made. I don't know if that's just the type of like, because it's a different color maybe, but I wouldn't think so. I think it just might be that, I bet part of it is I didn't wash that sock, the Craggy Shore sock, with a wool wash. I just washed it on its own, whereas this I washed it with a wool wash, which most wool washes contain a little bit of lanolin, which helps, from my understanding, I could be wrong, it helps make the wool a little bit more soft, and I don't want to say greasy. Greasy's not the right word, but it helps give it like its natural oil. But I don't know. That's just what I've gotten from it. So yeah, this is how it's going. Again, I don't remember what this is called. I do a really bad job of paying attention to smallish patterns and what they're called. Like the larger projects that I work on, I know any and everything about what the pattern's called and the designer, but not when it comes to smaller things, I guess like socks. So I should definitely work on that. I am just knitting these on my Chowgunitos, which I love. I feel like I can't talk today. Sorry. These are just the red lace twist Chowgu needles, and I am knitting them on a 2.5mm needle. And I have been keeping them in this super cute summery spring project bag that I made, and it has interfacing this time, so it has been holding its structure very well as compared to the other bags that I had made that didn't have any interfacing. That I definitely learned on, so that's pretty cool. I have enjoyed knitting on this just in the past time, not really whenever I really want to break from my half fisherman's rib sweater basically. So I have been knitting on that, which has been really nice and simple. I finished the heel flaps, now I just have to pick up stitches for the gusset, and then the lace, I've noticed, works by so quickly. I don't know what it is. I think it's just the fact that it's charts and it makes me want to continue on. It's also pretty fun. I like the lace. So it knits up really quickly once I get to that. Hopefully, this was my other thing with this project, is I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough yarn because I only had one skein. But because I just have the foot left, I think I might be able to I think I can get away with having this pair of socks, which would be so cool because I only bought, again, one skein, and I was like, okay, I can't knit two like ankle length socks, which is what I typically knit. I can't knit two of them. It's just not going to be enough yarn. So I saw the shorties and I was like, I probably can get away with it. Let's hope I can get away with it. So we will have to see. The next project that I have is my super exciting, oh, I'm so excited, I love this. Okay, this is the Lanark Sweater by Rebecca Clow, who is from the knitting podcast, the Crayabea podcast, and this is a half fisherman's rib or half brioche all around sweater, and it's also a quarter zip, so it'll be a zip. So I'm so excited. Okay, so I brought this with me on my trip to Arizona, and I think I had just finished, no, I didn't. Okay, yeah, I had just finished the collar, which, let me talk about that for a second. So I have made one pattern from Rebecca Clow, which is the Cargill Cowl, which I thought was an absolutely simple, easy to follow pattern. It was very beginner friendly. The stitch was a little bit complicated, but the actual pattern was written really, really well. So I was very excited to try another pattern of hers, and when I saw the Lanark sweater, at first I wasn't sure if I wanted to knit it because brioche just wasn't something I was super like wowed about, but after watching one of her podcasts where she really talked about it and the construction, and then she talked and showed the photos, and I just started getting really excited, and I decided to buy the pattern and cast her on. I actually wasn't expecting to make another sweater this year or this season, which I'm glad I did because we have had cold weather the last 2 weeks that I've been working on this when we are not supposed to have this cold weather. Anyway, so because the collar, she had even mentioned before that the collar was probably the most difficult part of the whole pattern, and not even just the collar, it's just joining the collar to the body and like starting after that section. And to sum it up is you basically finish the collar, you knit a really long tube, pretty much, not a tube, you knit a panel basically and fold it over, and then you're supposed to pick up stitches for a certain amount of time, and then you leave the stitches on hold. But the way that you pick up stitches, you were supposed to pick up stitches on the back panel and then cast on for each of the shoulder panels, which was just really confusing to me. The way that she wrote it out, I think would make sense if you made it match perfectly, and I thought I was doing that, but the way that she's telling you to like flip the garment to have your stitches on a certain side, it just wasn't matching up for me. So I don't know what it was, if it was a issue with the pattern. I don't think so. I think it was more just an issue of how I was knitting the pattern, more than likely, because I would have thought something like that would have been caught right away in testing. She did have a second pattern, updated pattern release after I think like the second week, where she updated stitch counts for larger sizes. I didn't see that my size was affected. I'm knitting the size 3, which hopefully isn't going to be too small. I don't think it will, but at the same time, my gauge is a little bit tight, just a little. Anyway, I didn't actually figure this out until I looked on the projects page on Ravelry, and then I saw somebody, thankfully, upload a picture of what it was supposed to look like, which is what I thought, but at the same time I was like, this doesn't really make sense. I don't know if this is correct. But because somebody else got that same conclusion, I figured, okay, that's probably right. I'm fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, and we'll be all good. So I did, and once I got past that, it's been really, really smooth, and the rest of it has worked out great. So you pretty much knit the back panel, and then you start knitting the side panels here, and then I'm just about to join, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough length, because I don't want my sweater to join and then it have been too short on the underarm. So I think if anything, because it's pretty much right there when I try it on. This sweater's not great to show because the sweater has a really deep armhole. But when I tried it on, it was pretty much right around there, and I had about an inch, maybe half an inch under the armpit. But you also do cast on a few stitches under there as well, and then continue knitting in the round. But I think if anything, what I'll do is I will connect the front so that way the zipper isn't affected and I can still get the correct zipper size. But I'll connect the front in here, and then maybe knit a little bit more in the front and a little bit more in the back, just to give me a little bit of extra room, and then continue in the round. That way I don't have to worry about having like armpits that are way up there, or armholes that are way up in my armpit. That's the only thing that I'm currently debating on, and I don't know. I'll have to see what I decide to do with that. I just was really, really timid to mess around with the zipper because I really want to follow this to pattern as much as I can, especially because adding a zipper in is a completely different skill to me that I have not done. So we will have to see. This is, I just jumped right into the construction, my goodness. Okay, so this is a half brioche sweater, which is the same as a half fisherman's rib. It's just depending on how you knit it. So the brioche stitch is used with yarn overs, and the half fisherman's rib is used from knitting one below. And I'm choosing the brioche because I find that faster and I just enjoy it more. But it is funny because there'll be a lot of times where I will forget that I'm knitting half brioche and not full brioche, and I'll want to like continue doing yarn overs on the right side as well, whereas half brioche you just do yarn overs on the wrong side. And you can see where a few times where like I missed the yarn over. It's just stockinette, or it's just rib right here, and then I don't know what happened here. I just noticed it, but like there's a little hole. I don't really know what I did there. I figured maybe it was just maybe tension, but I think it'll be pretty easy to fix once I get the body connected. I can just go in at the end and add like a duplicate stitch on top or something. And I should talk about the yarn that I'm using. So this is what I have left of the first skein, and I did use this first skein as leftover for my Lupin sweater, which I will insert a picture of because it's such a pretty colorwork sweater. And this is what I have left over, which I have so badly wished that I just made a yarn cozy to put this in, because I hate when it starts to get all loose and wonky, and the yarn cozies just help keep it really nice and snug and neat. But yeah, this is all I have left of the first one. But I am using one of my favorite yarns right now, which is Lion Brand's Respun. It is 100% polyester, and it is made from recycled polyester or plastics. And you get 10 ounces or 284 grams, and you also get 658 yards or 602 meters. So you get a lot of yarn for the price. I think these are about $8 in store, and I got these at Joann's, which always has sales going on. But I really, really love this yarn. It is so soft, and I made my Lupin sweater in it, and they have such pretty colors. The reason I chose this yarn is because they have such a large variety of colors. It's a great price, and it's very accessible to me. Whereas I would have loved to knit this in a woolly wool or very wool-like wool, but I just wasn't. I feel like that's a large investment with the amount of yarn that this eats up. So I'm excited to use this, and my goal is to see how this fits, see how I liked the process of it, and then if it goes well, I would love to knit my husband one, but in a more masculine color, I guess. A color that he would wear. This is crazy that I actually chose a neutral. I think the only reason I chose the neutral is because that's what I had a leftover in, because I, for whatever reason, cannot knit neutrals, even though I love neutrals and I love the idea of having a neutral color palette and a neutral wardrobe. I just never reach for it. I always reach for like the purples, the lavenders, the blues. I don't know what it is. But I'm very excited that I'm knitting this in a neutral. So this is, how it's coming out so far. You can really see a little bit of what it's gonna look like. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very excited. I think, oh my gosh, it's so cool. That is so cool. Maybe I can show you what I mean. I think I should knit a little bit more because, yeah, it's like right under there. Again, this sweater like has a very deep armhole, but yeah, I think I should knit a little bit more. You cast on a few stitches underneath, so there still will be a little bit of room, but I don't know. I don't want to stray too far from the pattern. It really depends. But yeah, I really like how it's coming out. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. I need to stop looking at myself in the camera right now. Oh, this is so cool. I did not think I was gonna ever knit a zipper sweater, first of all. Not that I didn't think I just didn't think I was gonna do it right away. And especially brioche, even if it's half brioche. I did not expect that I was gonna do this so quickly. I watched one of her podcasts where she had just pretty much released the Lanark sweater, like that week. And I was obsessed with everything that she was saying about it, all the project photos that I was seeing, and yeah, I don't know, pretty cool. See it? Like, this is what I mean, where I don't know if this is the right size for me to knit. It looks like it will be, and like it's not blocked yet. It stretches a little bit. My gate swatch is hanging up. But it did stretch a little bit, but I don't know. I think if anything, like, I just won't zip it up all the way. This is fine, right? Oh my gosh, I can start to see what it's gonna turn into. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. And I love the neutral. I was worried at first when I was doing this that like my skin color will kind of get lost in it, but I think I'm more pale, so who knows. Plus, I don't think that would actually stop me from knitting it in this yarn. This is the yarn I have. This is what I'm gonna knit it in. So that is how my Lanark sweater is going. And like I said, I brought this with me to Arizona, which you might be thinking, like, you live in the Midwest. Did you drive? No, I didn't drive. I flew, and I knew that I was taking a risk because I was bringing knitting needles. But I did some research, and again, it sounds like it's very hit or miss depending on the airport that you are flying out of. I flew out of MSP, which is Minneapolis in Minnesota. I flew out of there, and we flew into Phoenix. And I told myself, like, okay, we're taking an afternoon flight, which typically the afternoon TSA people are much more laid back. They're a little bit more relaxed. They're not as uptight as like the morning crowd as most places. So I was like, okay, I can probably be on their good side. But they recommended everywhere, like I saw online, recommended that you just make sure that they are put away in your bag. You don't have them out when you're going through security, and that they are properly stowed away. I don't know what properly stowed away means, whether that's in like a knitting in its little set or like locked away in a box, or I didn't know, but I didn't want to risk it. So what I did was I had my bag here that I made, which this has been so useful on the trip. I don't know if you can tell that it's grown a little bit and stretched, and I had to tie a knot because I I crocheted the strap way too long for where it would sit comfortably, so I had to make that adjustment. But I put it in this, wrapped the needles inside the project, wrapped the project up really nice and tightly, stuck it in this, folded it and wrapped it in my backpack, and just like kept it in there the whole way. I didn't even pull my needles out until we got pretty much to our gate. So I didn't have any issues. Nobody said anything. I was fine, and I was able to go through. And I did that at MSP and PHX, whatever Phoenix's airport is. I did it at both of them, and I didn't have any issues. So I was very excited about that. But that is how I was able to work on this. And I mostly did hotel knitting and then some car ride knitting. I didn't actually do a ton over the trip. I think I maybe knit the back panel and like had a few centimeters left to knit, which is good because I didn't have to do anything super complex, and it was really mindless, and I really enjoyed that. So that is that project, my Lanark sweater. The next whip that I have is being stored in this really cute little bag that I made. This was the first bag that I made, and I did not line it at all with interfacing, which is why it tends to be very flimsy. I mean, there's stuff in it, so it's not as flimsy right now. But when I take the stuff out, it just sags. Whereas this one has much more durability and sturdiness. I don't know, they're pretty cool. I like them. So this is, I am making another bag. Here is what my squares will look like. It's getting really washed out, sorry. Here is what my squares will look like. And I'm using this all up with scraps and acrylic yarn that I've been trying to de-stash from, so that way I can let nicer, more higher quality natural fibers into my stash. I'm very excited about that this year. So here are some that I've made. I think I've made about 6, and then I have a few like these. I think in total I need 13, maybe 14. I don't really remember. But I've just been keeping them all in here. And these are crochet squares. I have been using Red Heart Super Saver yarn in all of the colorways. I don't remember. This is like a champagne or beige maybe. This is white, green, and then the black, which I have caked up on my own because I just personally like these cakes more than the ones that they came in. And because my cakes were super like ratted up because I'd used them for so many other projects. So I just recaked it. And this has been a very like mindless, easygoing type of project. I'm just using this crochet hook that I have. I think it's one of those like Betty Smith, I think. I don't remember what they're called, but it's a 5mm hook. And yeah, I've just been using it pretty much whenever I get tired of knitting on the Lanark sweater, because I've noticed with brioche and the needle sizes that I'm using like a 3.5 middle. I'm using a 3.5mm needle for my brioche, half brioche Lanark sweater, and my hands get a little bit tired from that. So once I start feeling a little bit sore or stiff, I just switch to crochet, and I've been working on these. Like I said, this bag was so useful. I took it with me everywhere. I didn't even have to line it. I ended up just sticking larger things in it, but it worked so well, and I just couldn't be happier with it, so I'm making another. And I might make a ton. Who knows? We'll see. It's such a fun thing to make. And I've just been keeping those in here. I think that's all that I have for whips, which isn't crazy, but I did make some progress on them from the last podcast, so I'm excited about that. The next thing in my little podcast here is acquisitions, which I only have one, but it might be like my most exciting thing ever. So in the previous podcast, I talked about possibly picking up a skein that really reminded me of Arizona and that I could put in a combined project that I would get from other places that I would travel to, and it would be like my travel shawl or sweater or whatever I decided to make. Well, I picked up some of like the most beautiful hand-dyed yarn I have ever seen, and I fell in love with it instantly. So I got this at Tempe Yarns, which is a really amazing yarn store, like the coolest one I've ever been in, and I was just like fangirling and geeking out, and it was such a cool experience. I'm so grateful that my husband drove me there and like was okay with it, and it's just a funny story because I was not expecting to have time to even go, but we both decided to leave the race a little bit early. We just weren't feeling it like we normally are, so we left the race, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, there's a yarn store that's open, and he was like, okay, cool. And it was, oh my gosh, it was so exciting. So we got there. I'll insert a little bit of footage from me walking in. I didn't take anything inside the store, mostly because it was quite busy for it being, well, I mean, it makes sense. I think it was like an hour or so before they closed, and it was on a Sunday, so I'm sure there's quite a bit of people running in to want to grab something before it's closed. But the people there were so nice. They were so informative. They asked me right away if I was looking for anything specific, and I pretty much just said I was looking for something that was very local. I wanted something from a local dyer, or just something that was local to Arizona, specifically that area, because I wanted it to remind me of this trip. So she explained everything, and I told her I wanted fingering weight, just because I feel like that's a very versatile weight to use for something that's not planned. And so she showed me they had they had beautiful walls of yarn and all sorts of dyers, and they had it organized by brands, and she's so helpful. She was showing me all the different yarn dyers that they had and where they were from and what to look for to know if they're a yarn dyer. It was so cool. So after she explained the store and like the layout to me, she just kind of let me be and like go explore and find some pretty yarns, and I found this. So I originally wanted something that was gonna like scream and tell me that I was in Arizona when I picked this up. And this is by Dylicious Yarn, which is the yarn dyer that owns the store. So she has her own yarn brand as well, or dyeing brand. And I thought that was cool, so that's another reason why I chose this one specifically. But this just looks so much like the Arizona desert, and I was so excited about that. I was like, this is perfect. It is Carefree Tencel. So it consists of 75% superwash merino, 15% nylon, and 10% tencel. And you get 650 yards, and it's 6.5 ounces. So that's a good amount of yarn. I was too scared to get just a normal like 450 grams. Sorry, yards. I was a little bit nervous to get that size because I didn't want to end up making something on its own and running out of yarn. So I decided to go for a little bit higher, which I think I'll be able to get a tank top or a t-shirt that's like a very loose gauge. I think I'll be able to get that out of this, so that's exciting. This was probably the most expensive yarn I've ever bought, but it's fine. I'm very excited about it. When I got in the car and showed my husband, he was like, what? Yeah, so, but it's just beautiful. Look at that. Like, it's worth every penny in my opinion. So this, yeah, it is exclusively at Tempe Yarns, and what I liked about this was it was in their like one-offs sections, so they won't be remaking this, as far as what I understood from the employee that was helping me. And these are more like experimental one-offs on the side. They're not really colorways that they continuously bring back. So I was very excited to get this, and it's very soft. Like, It's oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So I'm thinking of making like a summer top, and I've looked at some of the patterns and there are a few that I do like, but maybe what I'll do is come out with another video where I share a lot of patterns that you can get away with knitting 650 yards worth of or so, albeit depending on your size, of course. Like a smaller size will require less yarn than a larger size, so they might not be able to knit that type of pattern. But in general, like looking at single skeins or larger skeins of fingering weight yarn and finding patterns that you can use for those. Otherwise, like, what are your guys' opinions or thoughts of making a combined shawl or something like that? Would this be a color that would work with others, or is it just on its own, like its own thing, you know? I feel like it'd be hard to match a color with this, but I'm also pretty new into color theory in a sense with knitting. I haven't really dabbled much into color work apart from like two contrasting colors, very clearly a neutral and very clearly like a bright tonal color. But maybe there are a lot more colors that would go with this that I could put together into some sort of project and not have anything that looks too like it didn't match well. I don't know, I would have to look into that a little bit more. But I think I'm more than likely just gonna make its own thing with this. Also, isn't it so cool? I love their logo here. Very Arizonan. So yeah, that was my only acquisition, but it was a lot of fun and I really liked it. So that's pretty much all that I have for yarn and my yarn related podcast. If you are interested in hearing about my Arizona trip, well then stick around for a few more minutes and I will share with you guys my videos and footage. If you don't care to hear but maybe you want to just see some of the footage, then I will also insert a timestamp and you can just enjoy some of the Arizona step and really fun gorgeousness that I got to experience. Alright, so the first thing we did was we flew out of MSP, which took a lot longer than we were expecting. I think the plane got delayed by like 3 hours, which was not fun because we were already taking a late night flight anyway. But I understand now why they did. Apparently there was some sort of threat at the airport in Phoenix which delayed all planes, so I just am much more grateful that we are all safe and everybody was safe and that nothing ended up happening. So I understand that. And we pretty much got into Phoenix at, it was late. It was probably, I think it was like 10 o'clock their time, 10:30. And we drove to Flagstaff where we were staying. And in Flagstaff we just pretty much crashed. We didn't get there though until, we didn't actually fall asleep until 3, so we actually had to have gotten and landed and started leaving like the rental car place at midnight. So I think by the time it was midnight we started heading towards Flagstaff, went to sleep around 3, and we were planning on just sleeping in and not worrying. Our night had already gotten a little bit delayed and later than we wanted it to be, but we both ended up waking up at like 6 in the morning feeling fine. So we both decided to like hop out of bed, get ready to go, and I think we were on our way to the Grand Canyon at like 8, maybe 7. So we got there and it was snowing. It was so snowy. I was not expecting there to be snow in Arizona. But it's fine. We were just kind of very surprised and shocked, and coming from Wisconsin where we wanted to get away from snow, it was a little bit sad. So we drove around the rim, enjoyed some of the views of the Grand Canyon, but we were really bummed because we wanted to do some hiking, but we realized very quickly that our shoes were soaked and we didn't want to do that to ourselves. So we just kind of spent a few hours there and then left. We drove back to Flagstaff through the Coconino forest, which was beautiful. I loved that. I actually really enjoyed that drive, and it was so cool because where we were driving there was a road that had piles of snow on both sides, and it was just like jaw-dropping how much snow there was. It was super windy, so there was a large drift that you could see, and it made the visibility of the road a little bit difficult. But I was absolutely shocked with the amount of snow that they got, and I guess we found out that they can get anywhere between like 50 inches and 150 inches of snow, averaging about 100 inches, which was just insane. I did not expect that type of snow in Arizona, but because it is more of a mountain climate, I guess it makes sense. And we drove back to Flagstaff, just kind of chilled out that night, really rethought about the trip and planning logistics for future trips, and understanding that just because it's March and the weather should be good doesn't mean that it necessarily will. So we did learn quite a bit from that, and pretty much just made sure that tomorrow was going to be a better day. And it was. So we spent the next day at the Petrified National Forest, or the Petrified National Park, which was so cool. We got to see the Painted Desert, which was absolutely beautiful, and I loved that whole part. It's gorgeous there. You can see like the blue mesa and all of the different layers of sediments, and it just is beautiful. And we also got to see the Petrified Wood, which is what the park is known for. It's so cool to just see wood just laying around there and being like rocks and crystallized. Like, that's just mind-blowing to me. So I really enjoyed that part of the trip as well. But before we even got there, we did decide to stop at Meteor Crater, which was really cool on its own too. We just really enjoyed that day altogether. It was a lot of fun. What was insane to me was like when you look down and you realize that they had like a 6-foot tall astronaut standing next to a full-sized flag. It was just like, what? You realize how far away, or like how, like the scale is just, you can't comprehend the scale of that crater. It's insane. And then we got to do a little bit of a tour in the museum and just learn a little bit more. It was really enjoyable and informative. It was a nice little stop. And then we also got to drive through the Desert Steppe, which was so cool to me. I didn't realize this, but northern Arizona is more of a semi-desert. I believe it's a semi-arid, cool, dry desert, I think. But basically it gets cold, and there's enough rainfall to not classify it as a desert, which is why there's a little bit more vegetation. But I don't know, it was just interesting. So that's like, again, we were cold, we had our coats on and stuff. I think it was 40 degrees. We weren't expecting that weather. But we made the most of the second day, so that was cool. And then we drove, I think we left the park around like 4, maybe 3:30, and then headed on our way down to Phoenix, which was like the coolest part, in my opinion, was that whole drive. You get to drive through the, I don't remember what they're called, but I'll put it right here, this mountain range, and it was just gorgeous. And I remember driving through this mountain range, you do enter the Sonoran Desert, but both my husband and I were curious if like you'll know exactly when you'll enter it, or if it'll be like a gradual thing and then all of a sudden you're just kind of in it. You definitely know when you enter it. It was so cool, and you got to see so many of these saguaros. I was like obsessed with the saguaros and like seeing them all along the side of the mountain. It was just a gorgeous, gorgeous landscape. I absolutely loved that. It was a lot of fun, and we pretty much got to see the sunset with the saguaros on the Sonoran Desert. Beautiful. And then we pretty much got into Phoenix, which it's on its own. It's a gorgeous city, the way that it's nestled in the mountains in its own little valley. Ugh, beautiful. And the next day we just pretty much hung out at the race in the morning. So we went down for the NHRA race, the Arizona Nationals. It was the last year that they will be having that at Wild Horse Pass. So we figured we might as well go ahead and check it out and see the last race there. It does sound like they are interested in making another race and having that come back, but it sounds like that original track is going to be no longer used for NHRA drag racing. But we went, and it was a little bit different than other races that we've gone to, and it was hard to really see the starting line and the tree. If you know about drag racing, which You might, maybe, I don't know. I didn't know about it till I met my husband. But if you look at from the stands, most of the places, most of the tracks, you can see the tree and you know when they're gonna start. Here, there were just so many people and they weren't sloped the nicest, so like everybody was in the way of each other. It was really hard to see anything, and we just weren't feeling it the same way. So we both decided to leave early, and that's when my husband took me to the yarn store, and that was really, really cute. It was, again, Tempe Yarns, just around the university, Arizona State University, just around there. And it was so cute. I loved it so much. And then we pretty much grabbed some food and then went home. We went to the hotel where we were gonna pretty much go to sleep early and then fly out really early the next morning. I think we woke up at like 3, so that way we could be by the airport at 4 and fly out at 6. So overall, it was a very jam-packed vacation, but we both really enjoyed it. The first day was a little bit rough, realizing that it's cold. We were not ready for cold, but by the end of the trip, we both really enjoyed it, and we were very glad that we went. The only thing that we would have done differently is instead of gone northern Arizona, I think we would have really enjoyed going more southern Arizona by like Tucson and going to the Saguaro National Park. I think that would have been a lot more fun for us personally, and like the weather situation and what we were looking for in a vacation. And I don't know, we'll have to see. We are planning to go back to the Saguaro National Forest. Why do I keep wanting to say forest? Saguaro National Park at some point, because I'm just obsessed with saguaros and what they look like. I think it's so cool. But yeah, that's pretty much how our trip went. I'm glad that you stuck around to listen to it if you did. And maybe you can give me some more ideas for if we were to go back to Arizona, or maybe what we missed out in Flagstaff. We were thinking about doing one of the hikes. So I guess the way that Flagstaff is it's a like historical volcano where pretty much the side of it blew off rather than vertical. The volcano blew sideways, which makes it have like these like 3 or 4 different peaks, which is really cool. But you have on one of the peaks a trail that goes all the way, and you can see like an overlook over the city. We were gonna do that, but it looks like it was more of like an off-roaded trail, and we were renting a tiny Corolla, which if you know about a Corolla, you know that that's not gonna do well on off-roads. So we both just decided it wasn't the right time. But I do think if we did ever go back, we'd want to do that. It's just whether or not we'll ever go back to Flagstaff specifically. But do leave some comments down below if that is some place, like a place that you've been and we missed out, because maybe we do need to go back. But yeah, that was my trip, and I really enjoyed it. It was a well-deserved trip, and it was very fun. So that is all that I have for you. If you're interested in seeing any of the footage that I have, feel free to watch the rest of the video. If not, I will see you next time. Anyway, thanks for staying. Happy knitting. I will see you on the next one. Bye! bye!